Well, hi there, Melanie. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Wonderful. I'm super. So we're talking to you in Canada right now. What
Yeah,
burg in Canada do you live?
I am in northern Saskatchewan.
Mhm.
Yeah, so probably very far from you.
Well, we're in the same time zone, actually. I think where I live in the United States, in Wisconsin, we do daylight savings time, and you don't. So
We
that's
do.
why we're a little bit off. Yeah.
Yeah.
So beautiful. So we were just talking a little bit ago, and you are in the process of the final, like you're raising your hands for the victory lap. You're publishing your book, and that's happening this Friday, you said?
Yes, the
Yeah.
official release date is Friday. It has been on Amazon for a while, like in the entire month of July, it has been there. So there have been people who've been reading it. But yeah, official launch on Friday, August
Okay.
4th.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Melanie, tell us about your book.
Okay, so my book is for teens and young women.
Mhm.
It covers 14 topics, 14 hard topics, such as challenges with body image, mental health, bullying, friendships, and other hard things that teenagers often go through. And each chapter is a standalone chapter on one topic, and each one has a valuable lesson or a takeaway. So, what I wanted my readers to grasp is that we all have the strength to overcome hard things, challenging things, and we are stronger than we think. We have a lot more control over our future and our circumstances than we sometimes believe. And it is possible to love ourselves. So those were kind of what I was aiming for in my book. Uh, what's also important to note about the book is what it is not. So it is not a preachy book. I think
Hmm.
teenagers have enough, people telling them how to be and what to do and what not to do. So I did not want it to be preachy. I did not want it to be filled with statistics and facts. I wanted it to be very simple to read, very relatable. I wanted the book to also be applicable to other situations, other hard things. So there are 14 hard topics, but they're easy to, um, learn from and apply in other situations. And
Mhm.
there are some pretty deep topics that I talk about. I think in particular my chapter 8, which is it is the heart of my book. It is the chapter on mental health. Um,
Mhm.
it is a hard. I still can't read the chapter without crying. It is a deep topic, something very hard to talk about, but I think it is very important for kids, for teenagers, for young adults to read that and to talk about it. So I hope that my book will spark conversation in families around the dinner table, because all the topics, in my opinion, in that book should be openly discussed around the dinner table, with your mom and dad and your friends and your siblings and everyone else. So yeah, that's my book.
No taboo topics. Everything is up for grabs and should be talked about, not just, oh, this is going to be a hard conversation. How do I broach it? How do I
Yes.
start? What do I say? What happens if I don't know all the answers?
Mhm.
It sounds like this book is kind of a starting place
Mhm.
for some information where you could then, kind of riff on, hey, I was reading this and what do you think about this idea?
Mhm.
Cool. So what
Yeah.
was the impetus for this book? What made you want to write it? Where is this book coming from?
That is a great question, and it's a long answer, but I think it's important for me to go back and explain how this all started.
Hmm.
So in 2015, so I'm a teacher. Well, I was a teacher. The last 3 years, I was actually the principal in my school, and I have stepped away from that position. So I'm not going back to principalship in September, but I was a teacher for about a dozen years. And in 2015, I lost a student to suicide. I was at work, and this beloved student took his life just outside of the school at the beginning of the day before buses arrived. It was, I think back to that day, and it felt like the entire day kind of went in slow motion. It was a traumatic event for everyone who was there, students, teachers, and obviously the family. So for the following weeks after this tragic event, I was on autopilot, um, trying not to think about anything really, because every day I was stepping back into a space that didn't really feel safe anymore for me. So it was easier for me to almost turn off my brain and not allow myself to go there. And I also became hyper aware of how my other students were.
Hmm.
Um, I did not want their struggles to go unnoticed. I wanted them to be able to talk about what they were going through, and not just related to the loss of their friend, but any challenges, because teenagers go through hard things. So I became a little bit hyper aware of the signs that they were sending me, and the things that they were not saying, what their body language was telling me. And it was really hard, and I didn't realize until a few years later how hard that was. I kind of just I went through it without knowing how that suicide had affected me. So fast forward to 2018, another young man lost his life to suicide. He was my best friend's brother, and he had been one of my former students. And when that happened, it kind of it spiraled me back. Like I spiraled backwards. But this time, I decided I need to feel the feelings. So I started to journal. I made the choice. I was very, very busy at that time. I have 3 small kids. I was doing my master's degree. I was coaching a volleyball team, and I was working full time. And I did not want to, I wanted to feel grounded again. So I decided that I would wake up early and I would start to journal. So, and that was in September 2018. So I would wake up in the morning, I would make my coffee, and then I would journal. And I've always I know that journaling is important. I think it's very helpful to have that quiet time alone, and to let your thoughts come out and put them on paper. So that was very helpful. A few months later, in January, I that I kept up with that practice of waking up. But I waking up early and doing the journaling, but I wanted to do something more. So I started to write. I would take out my laptop, and I started to put thoughts in a document, in a Google Docs document. And it was what I would have liked to tell my struggling students. I was not writing a book at that time. That was far from the plan. I did not think I would ever write a book. I am not someone who dreamed of being an author. I just wrote, and it was therapy for me. I felt like I was doing something. I It was a mess. It was a mess of words on paper. I just kept writing, but I did it day after day after day. So a year later, I had, over 55,000 words in this document. And it was kind of, I don't know, I kept thinking maybe this could be valuable for someone. That thought didn't leave. I kept, it was like a whisper that got louder and louder and louder, that was telling me that I needed to publish this book. And I couldn't ignore that whisper anymore. It was like it took over my thoughts. Like, I have thought about it all the time. So in 2020, and like, this is a long process. This started in 2018. In 2020, in January, I'm lucky enough to have 2 sisters. They are my best friends.
Yeah.
I told them about this project I was working on, and that I was thinking of publishing it. And I asked if they would read it and give me feedback, and they both agreed. So in the first few months of 2020, I went back at the beginning of my mess of, words. I couldn't even really call it a manuscript because it was just such a big mess. And I started to create chapters, and I would send those chapters off to my sisters as soon as one was completed, and they gave me the most helpful feedback. Notes and notes and notes. Like my Google Docs document was filled with notes and ideas. They were so helpful. And something interesting happened in August of 2020. So, speaking of this writer's block phenomenon, so I started a new job at the end of August, and it was like my creative energy was gone. I was I had to use my brain power for my job. And I feel like now that I say that, it's almost like an excuse, because I do know that there was another reason why I was not able to edit anymore and write anymore. It was also a lot because of the fear that I was feeling. It was so much easier for me to, just quit. It would have been easier for me to quit. And at that time, I think I used my job as an excuse not to write. I would wake up in the morning, I kept up with that practice, I had my laptop open, but I just couldn't write. Like it wouldn't work. Like I was completely blocked. But really, I think it was the fear, because publishing is very scary. Writing was easy, because I just wrote anything for an entire year. I just put words on paper. But the actually putting it out there and having other people read your words, that is a very scary thing. So for about 2 years, my manuscript, what had become, it was, I
It
had
had
worked on,
become a manuscript now. Yeah. I
right.
recognize what it was. Yep.
Yeah, it remained untouched for 2 years. And then, and the pandemic was happening throughout all this too. In
That
20,
wasn't stressful for anybody.
yeah, yeah. And I was a new principal in a school, and we were going back to school after having been at home for a few months, and it was a lot. But that thought, I kept thinking about this book. That thought never left. It got louder and louder again, and I kept hearing that we were kind of entering a post-pandemic mental health crisis. And here I had this book that I had written for teens, all about overcoming obstacles, and I was just sitting on it. I wasn't doing anything with it. So I self-edited my book a couple more times, start to finish. And then I hired an editor through Reedsy, and she did a developmental and a copy edit on my book. And then I worked with a self-publishing company, and the woman I worked with, she did all the heavy lifting and like the formatting and getting this book to be a book. So that's kind of how it all went down. But I really never thought I would write a book. That was not my plan until I couldn't ignore that I actually had a book. So
wow. So
yeah.
when you were a kid, were you a writer? Did you, how far back does your writing go? To just get into some ancient history. Were you one of those kids that, or did you just pick up writing, like you said, after this experience as a form of therapy?
I remember writing. I remember writing in a journal when I was a kid, and not as consistently, but I remember writing. I actually talk about one of my journal entries in my book, because I remember that journal entry. So I don't know why I remember that one in particular, but I remember talking about it had to do with body image, and so I had written that in my book. I talk about that a little bit. So I remember journaling. I remember enjoying writing at school. So I wrote in French and I wrote in English. I remember my grade 2 teacher being impressed by a poem that I had written.
Hmm.
And she had told my parents about it. So that was significant for me. And
Mm.
I also had a teacher in high school who showed one of my pieces to his classes, that the classes that had followed me, kind of as an example of what he was looking for. It was a childhood memory that I had to write about. So I think that helped, like hearing that people appreciate your work. And yeah, but I would write because I had to. I wrote when I did my master's degree because I had to,
Mm.
and I enjoy writing, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. Oh, so when you were writing, so you kind of started writing this as a form of therapy, and that is such a powerful way to um to express yourself and really, work those feelings in a way that not only is powerful, but also in a way that gives you the time and the space to use it as you need. So when you said that then you put it away for 2 years, it sounds to me like it was almost like a cake that you put in the oven. It needed to
Yeah.
cook for a little bit.
Well, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
That
I
sounds a
don't
lot nicer.
I guess I don't think that things in our lives happen for no reason. So for whatever reason, you may never know, but for whatever reason, maybe your book needed that time to come out at the right time.
Yes, I think I needed that time.
Mm.
I grew a lot in my 3 years as principal.
Mhm.
Yes, I think I needed that time. And I agree, it had to happen this way. But it did bug me that I was, I wasn't working on it anymore. And
Yeah.
it was, yeah,
Well, especially when your sisters had been helping, it sounded like they put in a lot of time too. And
yeah,
without them, you would ask them for help, they had helped you, and then you sat on it, then you didn't utilize it with all the work that they had done. That
yeah,
was maybe a little motivating.
yeah, for
Mhm.
sure.
So when you were working with them, at what point did your book actually have chapters? Did your sisters help you put it into chapters and say, here are the different aspects of your story or your writing that would make sense? Or how did you start organizing it at the beginning?
You know what? I don't remember because it was a long time ago, but
Mhm.
I decided what chapters I wanted to write.
Mhm.
Um, and I was inspired by my students, and I was inspired by what I had gone through as a teenager and a young adult. When I was done, when I had sent all my chapters to my sisters for feedback,
Mhm.
there were, I think, 2 chapters that I had not included that they recommended I add.
Oh,
So I did that. So yeah, I did choose the other chapters. There were a couple that I added later on.
okay. Are there any that you took out?
You know what? I don't remember. There has to be one that I took out. I don't know what it was. Um,
Uh-huh.
and the reason I know that is because I have 14 chapters, and at one point I had 15, but I couldn't tell you what that 15th chapter was. I don't know.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you were writing your book and you were, it sounds to me like you gave yourself a lot of grace. You didn't realize at the beginning. I don't know if we trick ourselves and just say, this doesn't mean anything. This is just me getting my thoughts down. This isn't going anywhere. And that releases that inner critic so that we're able to get our thoughts and our true feelings down on paper. I think that's a great strategy.
Mhm.
Because, when that critic comes in too early, that can shut you down, and you just get stuck and you start editing too soon and all the good stuff, all the juicy stuff, all that really the stuff that makes it deep and so um understandable for people who deal with I mean we've all held so many different issues when we were teenagers. I don't think you can get through your adolescent years without some kind of trauma. I always laugh when somebody says that this was a really I was also a teacher. I retired after 29 years in the classroom. I put in my resignation on March 15th
Ooh,
of 2020, and
yeah.
everything shut down on the 17th. So, my last 6 weeks of teaching were like, ah, how does this work? I was a first grade teacher. So when I talking with teachers and parents, there's always this phrase that's thrown around, well, they come from a really dysfunctional family. And I keep thinking to myself, what family doesn't have their shit? I mean, everybody's got their stuff, and it just matters. I mean, all of my kids are adopted, and we've had some, big traumas and little traumas, big T and little T's, in our lives. And my one daughter, who's 14, especially, I've sat her down and said, "Okay, girl, this is our stuff. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
what family you grow up in. You're going to have your stuff. Nobody is perfect. People may look perfect from the outside, but I don't believe there's any family that is truly perfect. And if
Yeah,
you
I
are,
agree.
maybe that comes up with a whole batch of other issues. But
Oh,
so
sure.
that's why your book is so valuable, because I think we're fooling ourselves if we don't have at least a couple of things that are probably, highlighted in your book.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I talk about that a little bit too. I have a chapter on social media
Mm-hmm,
and the pressures of social media
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
how you can be scrolling through your social media and just assume everyone is leading these absolutely perfect lives.
mm-hmm.
You can be fooled into thinking everyone is happy. You can also fool others into thinking, that you are happy because it's so easy. Um, and it's not like that. Everyone has their baggage. Everyone has their struggles. Uh, yeah, it's the truth for
Yeah.
sure.
So getting back to your book again. So you had it edited by your sisters. How
Yeah.
did you go about finding an editor outside of your family to look at your book?
Well, I used Reedsy,
Okay.
and I use their platform to filter out different editors. I wanted someone who had already worked on some nonfiction books, self-help books, and I ended up finding one, and she was from Canada. So that was also not that I needed someone from Canada specifically, but I appreciated that she lived in Canada. And yeah, I hired her. So we did all of our work long distance. She's in a different province. So
Hmm, hmm.
yeah.
When you were writing, did you ever consider, like, your sisters helped you a lot in the editing process. Did you ever consider like being part of a writers group or getting together with other people who were also writing, or was this really a personal, private, solitary practice for you?
It was very solitary. I did not. I feel like I went into this completely blind. Maybe because I wasn't at first I wasn't writing a book, so I kind of just put words on paper, and
Hmm.
once it was publishing time, I went through the steps that through a very quick Google search, was told that this is what I should do, and that's what I did.
Hmm.
I think if I would write another book, uh, I would do things differently, and I would try to work with more people because I think people have great ideas, and everyone has something to bring, something to offer. So, yeah,
Well, just support through the process,
yeah,
you're not alone. It doesn't have to be so solitary. And I think there's, maybe this book was meant to be written in a solitary fashion, and maybe your next one, who knows?
yeah.
So how did what you mentioned Reedsy a couple of times? Is that Readzy?
Reedsy,
Okay. And how did you find that?
just online again, and that's a website. I've only hired an editor through Reedsy, but they have other people, graphic designers. There are the editors. There's people who can help with other things, but I only use them for my editing.
Okay. So your book is beautiful.
Oh,
how
thank
did you
you.
come up with, the outer, the cover and everything? What was your process there?
So once the manuscript was ready to go, or almost, I made changes right up to the last second. I kept I kept rereading it. I was at the beginning of July. Our holidays start at the end of June
Okay.
in Canada. So I worked until the end of June, and then I had July off. And I read my book over and over again, and I kept finding little
And
things
every
that,
time you read it, you keep finding problems,
yes,
right?
yes, and I've put it away. I've decided I submitted my last comment, my last change. So yeah, after the manuscript was pretty much completed,
Mhm.
it just, things happen so it's weird how everything happened. So I was invited to a Christmas party last Christmas. It was a party for a group of women who belong to a coaching community, and I belong to that group. It's a Facebook community, and our team leader had invited everyone over for a Christmas party. And at that Christmas party, someone was talking about a woman in my province, like she doesn't live too far from me, who has a company, kind of a self-publishing company. So she helps authors, do the heavy lifting in the publishing. Besides editing, she does editing too, but I didn't need her for that. But she does everything from like the book cover, the formatting. She made sure my book was available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and everything. She did all of the behind the scenes work on my book. So I heard about her, and the reason we were talking about her is because our team leader at this coaching party, she interviewed this woman in one of her podcasts. So I said, well, I'm going to go listen to this podcast. I'm intrigued. So I listened to the podcast, and I told myself, this is the woman I need to be working with. Her company is called Big Moose Publishing. She was so easy to work with. I submitted my manuscript, and it was almost like she was on call to work with me only. I felt so special. The formatting of the book, she would send me examples, like, do you like these fonts? Because I have 2 fonts in my book, because every chapter is split into 2 parts. I wanted a story, something that my readers can relate to in the first part of the chapter, and then there are kind of like the takeaways and my own thoughts on that topic in the second part. So I wanted 2 fonts. So she would send examples to me, and we chose those. And then my book cover, it was kind of a back and forth thing. She would create a book cover, and then I would say, no, I don't like this. I like this. Can this be bigger? I want these colors. And she just kept coming at me with different book covers until I fell in love with the one I chose. And we tweaked it a little bit after I had gotten my proof copy, because once you hold it in your hands, it doesn't compare. So there were some things I wanted to change, and yeah, she did all of that.
Wow.
So I take zero credit for the book cover. It was my publisher.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so now, have you got some, it's coming out on Friday. Have you
Yes.
got some, readings and, like events set up yet to get your book out there and to create some excitement around it?
Not yet. Well, I do have a launch party the night before
Okay.
on Thursday at my place. I have a beautiful acreage, so I invited pretty much everyone. It was an open
Come
invitation.
on over.
Yes, I was expecting my family and my very close friends to come, but it's turning out to be kind of a bigger event. Lots of people want to come. I have the best community, so it sounds like a lot of people are coming. It's I called it my cupcakes and cocktails launch. So I will
Oh,
be serving cupcakes that I ordered. Someone's making them, and we'll have cocktails, and I will talk about the book a little bit. So I've got that on Thursday night. And I don't know how things work in the States, but you must have Indigo too in the States. We have Indigo. So I can get the book into local Indigos, and sometimes they want you to do a reading and stuff, but I wanted to have the books before, and that took a while. I was only able to
yeah.
order them in July, so I have them now. now I'll be setting things up. And
Did you get
yeah.
the box? I mean, did it come in a box and you just kind of pet the box for a little bit and just
Oh, pretty much I could have kissed the box. I was so excited. I ordered one box, and yeah, it was full of books, and my
Mhm.
three kids were there. My husband was there. They watched me open this box, and
Oh,
I've ordered another box. So now I've got this. Thank goodness I ordered a second box because they went pretty quick, which was good. I did kind of pre-order um, thing on Instagram and Facebook, and
mhm,
yeah, that was
mhm.
that was nice to get that first box out into people's hands, and yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome. So now are you still writing? Have you started? I mean, are you just kind of journaling? Are you kind of playing around with another idea? Where are you right now?
Another good question. So I am not writing another book yet.
Mhm,
Uh, right now, in the last few weeks, my main focus has been launching.
mhm,
So I've been working a lot on that. But I do have two fairly big ideas that I will be. The first one I've already started. It's I can tell you what it is.
mhm. Let's
Not
hear it.
that my idea is not perfectly, formulated
Fleshed
yet,
out.
but yeah, I want a an ebook that for parents that accompanies the book that I wrote. So my book is
Mm,
intended for teens and young adults, but I would really like something to go with it for parents and caregivers or teachers or people who work with kids,
mhm,
just so that the language is the same,
mm.
um, so that what the teenager is learning, that the teacher is also teaching.
Kind of
So
like
it's all
everybody's on the same page.
right, exactly. And I have a teenager. So my oldest is 14, and my I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. And I am lucky enough to have been brought up in a family where sitting at the dinner table was a must for lunch and for dinner. We call it supper. um, so I do the same with my kids. So we have lots of very interesting conversations around the dinner table.
Mm,
And I am very open to discussing whatever the kids want to talk about, whatever I think is important. But even I have a hard time bringing up
mm,
hard topics and knowing how to navigate that and how to, what is the right thing to say. And not that I think that there is a right thing and a wrong thing to say. I think we're all trying our best. But I think parents would appreciate having kind of a guide, and they can tweak
mhm.
it and make it their own, but something to kind of get them started so that conversations are happening around the dinner table again, like we didn't have phones when I was growing up.
Yeah.
We didn't have social media, so you were forced to talk to your brothers and sisters, and
Well, it's
yeah.
one of our, I mean, in terms of social media, just two of the rules we've had in my house. I have two sons who are adults, and I have a 14-year-old daughter. And we've always said telephones on the charger at 8:30, so there are no telephones in the evening or in the bedrooms, and there's no telephones at the table. Just very
Yeah.
simple. And it's been kind of awkward. The hardest part is when my daughter or one of my kids has had a friend over and we've not told them about that family rule ahead of time. And then I'm kind of like doing charades with my daughter saying, you know, put it,
Yeah.
and she does, and so then I just let it go, and it's and that friend is over there doing their own thing, totally oblivious that none of the
Yeah.
rest of us have got a telephone out.
Yeah.
But I feel it's really important that, you honor some restrictions on social media um, and respect the time that you have, this limited time that we have with our kids,
Yes,
to have
exactly.
communication and, a give and take of ideas and thoughts.
For sure. I 100% agree.
Mm,
And I think some of the things we discuss seem to be like they can seem like just, very, very small issues, or, my kids are young, so what they're going through is maybe considered small, in comparison to other things that teenagers can go through. But
Mhm.
if we don't even talk about the small stuff, how can we, feel comfortable talking about the big stuff? So
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
my book has 14 topics, and some of them, might seem a little bit more, you know, uh, a lot
Lightweight, and
harder.
some of them
Yeah, and
are more heavy duty.
exactly. But they're all just as important,
Right.
uh, in my opinion. So yeah, that's one thing I'm working on. And then I have another project that will come a little bit later.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
a question for you. What kind of, just out of curiosity, what kind of teacher were you? What did you teach when you were in the classroom?
Uh, I was a math and science teacher in high school.
Mhm.
So I worked with mostly the older grades,
Mhm.
the 16, 17, and 18-year-olds.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I did have, like, I'm in a very small French community,
Yeah.
and I worked in the French school. French is like the minority here in Canada.
Mhm.
So our school was a very small school. I had small classes, like 8, 10 students. So very intimate. You
Yeah.
really get to know them. You really know you know their families. They know you.
Mhm.
Uh, and oh, I was gonna say something and I totally forgot what my point was. Anyway,
Well, even in a situation like that, I bet that was hard. I mean, part of the shock and the total unbelievable, you know, I no other word other than the word shock comes to me when you
yeah.
had those students and the son of your
Mhm,
friend who took their own life. If you've got such a small community, you would have assumed that you would, sure there's things that you thought that how could this happen in
mhm.
this community with this kind of tight knit group of people who we all, know and love and care for one another.
Yeah. Yeah, it devastates the entire community when that happens
Mhm.
because you know everyone. Like the student, I had been his teacher in grade 5, in grade 6, and then he was in 10th grade when he
Mhm.
passed away. So I knew him for a long time, and then he was kind of a family friend before that. Like I knew him. He was just a
Mhm.
tiny kid when I first met him. So yeah,
Mhm.
it is like that. Yeah, for
Exactly.
sure.
So what's so intriguing is when somebody has a big emotional event like that. Um, I adopted my kids, and throughout the story, there were so many ups and downs, and it was like, oh my God, Lisa, you've got to write about this. This is just so, interesting. Do you think in order to have a book published, you have to have these big traumatic, you know, emotion-packed things to write about? What do you think about people who, just where do you think these stories and ideas come from, and which ones, how do we assign, whether this one should be published or not? Any thoughts about that? I'm thinking about people who would be listening to our podcast and wondering, oh, well, I don't have this experience or I don't have that experience. But I just
Yeah.
really want to encourage people to get their ideas out there.
Well, I could have easily been the person who said, my trauma and what I went through is not really big enough for me to write about.
Hmm.
I could have easily, because I was not this student's mother,
Mm-hmm.
that her life was changed, forever. Like she lost her son. I was not my best friend. She lost her brother. I was not like I don't know how. Obviously, what she went through was, you could say, was a lot more traumatic than what I went through. I was the teacher.
Yeah.
I think everyone has a story. I think what's important is for us, for everyone to, like I said at the beginning of the interview, that um, we need to take time to uh, kind of, we need to be quiet. We need to allow ourselves to be in a quiet space. When I would wake up in the morning and I journal, no one was up, it was dark outside. Um, that whisper, that thought that is trying to guide us becomes louder. We can hear it when we're quiet.
Hmm.
And I think if you quiet down and you give yourself time to, hear those thoughts and feel the feelings that go with it, it'll kind of guide you. And I think we all have a story. And I think if you can, like, I don't know if everyone will write a book, but I mean, there's something that you can do with that, with your story. You talk about your legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think, uh, yeah, I think we all have a legacy, and whatever it looks like is the way it was meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If we listen, maybe we can leave I don't think any legacy is more important than another, but I think if you listen, you can create something that can be amazing and can be helpful for someone else. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's so important to just listen to your heart, listen to yourself, listen to that voice, because
Mm-hmm.
it's there. It's a voice that is it is yours. It is unique to you. It is a thought that you're supposed to listen to and you're supposed to do something with.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's, it's not specifically about book writing, but it could be, what profession that you're supposed to pursue, or relationship that you're supposed to pursue, or everything. Like, we have thoughts and we have feelings, and they're there to guide us. And if we quiet down enough, we can hear it. It becomes loud enough for us to understand. And
Yeah. And I
yeah.
think, I think that the fun thing is to explore different kinds of writing, both, both writing that we just sit down and, could kind of do the brain dump, and just get the garbage out so that the pipes can be fresh for whatever life experiences that are meant to come through us, are able to. And I
Mhm.
think there's also a place for writing, with like maybe writing prompts. This past week, myself and the Sidetrack sisters got together when we wrote about um, an adventure or a travel story that we had, and I wrote about a weekend, and I hadn't thought about it for so long. I met some friends in a class I took, and they said off the cuff, "Hey, you want to go on a road trip to Graceland this weekend?" And I was like, "Yeah." I mean,
Mhm.
just a quick, crazy little drive, and so I wrote about 600 words about a weekend trip to Graceland and everything I could remember about the adventure. And
Yeah.
pulled up a couple of old pictures, and it was like, oh, I got those Elvis earrings that I used to wear for years, and they just always made me feel like, say yes to instead of going, oh, I've got laundry to do this weekend, or, all the things, the house is such a mess. I should stay home and get some stuff done.
Yeah.
Just saying yes to sometimes those little crazy things that pop up that, you know, for whatever reason we say no to. And now
Yeah.
looking back on, I'm so glad that I said yes. And that these Elvis earrings that I had purchased always reminded me of possibility of just impromptu, being open to fun impromptu things, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, and you never know where the writing's going to take you. I think people have a deep need though to express themselves, and to put themselves out there and to be heard. I think there's a deep human need that, we don't get in social media. I think there's more of a competition or not, yeah, kind of a yardstick about how do I measure up compared to this. Where
Yeah.
when we write, it's something where, and then we hear that it meant something to other people. It gives us this deep feeling of connection.
Mhm.
And that feels really good. And it gives us a sense of purpose and value. And like, I have something to say that means something because it's meant something to somebody.
Mhm.
Hmm. So what
Yeah.
kinds of words of wisdom do you have for people who, whether or not they've had, something traumatic happen to them? What do you have to say to people who have thought about writing and for whatever reason have not done that yet?
Well, I can definitely relate, because I know that it is a terrifying thought to write, to publish, like, to have other people read your work. I understand. I think if you have that if there's an idea, you should definitely run with it. Like that idea was given to you for a reason, and you are the person who is supposed to take that idea and make something out of it. And yes, it is scary, and it is, you could be. It's like I felt very vulnerable putting some of the stuff on paper that I was that I would I wanted to be vulnerable because I feel like that's more relatable than if I would just, kind of scratch the surface. And
Yeah.
but that means that people are reading things that make me feel vulnerable. So it is scary. I totally understand, but it's so cliche, but just go for it. Just do it and don't quit.
Mm. Were there any parts of your writing that there were specific individuals that you were afraid would not understand or have a hard time reading what you wrote?
Oof.
What I'm getting at is sometimes people will write memoir and it's like Aunt Sally was a real
Oh
bitch
yeah.
when, and if you're going to write your story, you want to be truthful, but you don't want to hurt your cousins. Maybe Aunt Sally's not around anymore, but you're afraid that if you tell the truth about something,
Mhm.
somebody's going to be angry or get hurt or not understand.
Um, I have to say no.
Okay.
I never once thought, I can't write this because it'll hurt someone, because there's
Mhm.
nothing hurtful in my book.
Okay.
The only person I did speak to is the mother of the student. I
Mhm.
lost, we all lost in
Yeah.
that in suicide. I talked to her because I wanted her to know what I was writing.
Mhm.
I wanted to honor him, and I did not talk about the suicide. I didn't make assumptions about what anybody else was going through and what anybody else was feeling. I talked very much just about my
Mhm.
experience with that. And she was okay with that. She's the only person that I made sure was okay with it. There's nothing else in the book that could be hurtful. If I talked about if I talked about someone, I used a different name. And even in those stories, it's not really anything that someone could be offended by. I was very careful about
Okay.
that.
I was
Um,
wondering, when you said that every chapter has a story that goes with it, are those
yeah.
stories that you came up with or that actually are based in reality?
Most of them are based on reality.
Mhm.
Most of them are inspired by, things I've either personally gone through or someone close to me has gone through, one of my students has gone through. But you wouldn't be able to identify the person I'm talking about.
Okay.
I was very careful about that. And
Mm.
yeah, in the stories, it doesn't make anyone look bad. I
Mhm.
feel like everything I talk about is very, very normal.
Mhm.
And yeah, so no, I was never worried about that. One thing I did make sure that I talked about in my like in social media when I'm talking about my book, I want parents to know that if they buy this book for their teenager, it is definitely a book that they should be, don't take this, my words, as something that is written in stone. This is something that is up for discussion. So if I'm talking about, you know, uh, for instance, I have a chapter on bullying, I have another one on body image and social media. If you don't agree with something like that, you should definitely talk about it. And you should, but it doesn't mean that what I wrote is the way everyone should
Yeah.
talk about those hard topics. I think it's
Yeah.
important to just know what you want your kids to experience and how you want them to go through it. And it's a guide. I mean, it's definitely not something that is not a Bible. We don't have
Okay.
to follow
Yeah.
the things
Well,
that
and I always think when a parent has a challenge with something that their teenager has read, I guess I've always thought this is an opportunity. This is a
yeah.
great opportunity to talk about what your thoughts and values and feelings and experience
Hmm.
what those are for you and how you came up with your philosophy and
Yeah.
what you want them to think um whether or not that's what they do or will think and really just having it as a springboard for conversation for because that's how a child, any of our children, is going to develop a healthy and confident self self-regulation system, I guess, by
Mhm.
knowing that they have value. And that value isn't based on if they walk, directly in our line as a parent, or if they
Mhm.
take their own tack.
Mhm.
They are valuable and loved and appreciated and valued.
Yeah.
Um, whichever if whether they agree or not with us.
Yeah.
Hmm. So
Exactly.
So, what we were talking about advice that you would give for anybody who's wanting to get their ideas out there, and you
Mhm.
said just write it, do it,
Mhm.
start the process. Do you think you said you're continuing to write? So
Mhm.
you were a teacher in the classroom, then you became a principal.
Mhm.
So what's next for you on the professional track? Are you moving into another career or what's happening for you?
I'm still working in the education system.
Okay.
I I'm not exactly sure what that's going to look like in September. I will be working in like the student services department,
Mm,
which is good. That's what I requested. I would like to go back to working with students in one way or another.
mm,
I was open to going back into the classroom, but I live in a rural community, and we happen to have a school here. But if I didn't work at the school in my hometown,
mhm,
I would be driving pretty far to get to the next French school.
yeah,
So I'm staying with my school division, and it's not very clear exactly what
mhm,
my mandate will be this year, but yeah, I'm really trying to push some kind of something related to mental health in our
mm.
schools, whether it's mental health for the teachers or for the students or both.
Or both.
Um,
Yeah, both.
yeah, yeah. So I'm hoping I'll be able to have my hand in there a little bit and maybe bring some resources in and help
Mm,
out with that. But I'm not exactly sure yet.
okay. And
Whatever. Oh, sorry.
no, no, keep going.
I was just gonna say whatever it is, it's going to have to because as a teacher, I felt I loved my job as a teacher. And because I loved my job as a teacher, I was able to write because I was teaching and I was writing at the same time. And
Mhm.
I felt like my creative energy was
This,
there. It was present. I was able to create. Um, Whatever my next job is, I need to be able to have time to do something creative because I
mm,
think that affects every other part of my life. So I will be
mm,
very, I will be very choosy about what I'm doing
mm,
as a
mhm.
job.
There you go. Wonderful. Well, Melanie, I look at the time here. It's like, oh, we got to wrap things up here. Tell us where we can find you. I know you mentioned that your book is already on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, Walmart,
Yeah.
maybe?
You know what? It could be. I'm not sure, but I
Not
do
sure
know
about
it's
that
on
one.
Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
People can also order the book directly through me on my website if they are
Okay.
in Canada or in the States.
Hmm.
My website is my full name, melaniegareau.ca.
Hmm.
I don't know if I can send it to you so you have the correct spelling.
Good.
Um, and I do have an Instagram account and a Facebook account with the same name. It's melg.author.
Okay.
Uh, and I think that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, Melanie, it has been so lovely talking to you. I mean, so many people aren't getting the exposure. And I just love talking with authors and storytellers and creative people who who are putting their stuff out there and just saying, here it is, and this is me, and this is what I created. Here is like a gift to the world. And yours is such a valuable gift. I think it's going to be really helpful for so many teens and their families because it's what we need right now. There
I
is such a mental health, and there are so many. crisis, and there are so many things that are bombarding our our kids right now. I mean, if I
Mhm.
heard it once, I've heard it 100 times. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad I'm not teaching anymore, or I'm not starting out my teaching career right now, or I'm so glad my kids are older and I'm not having to raise kids in this environment now. And it's like, well, guess what? There are still kids being born and going to school, and they need help. They need resources. They need people who understand, and they need adults in their lives who can help them, because every generation, every group of kids, they've got their stuff, and
Yeah.
it's people like you who are providing resources for them and for us, to make this the best time for everyone.
Mhm. Yeah, well,
Beautiful.
thank you. It has been an honor for me to speak
Awesome.
with you. Thank you so much.
This was fun. Thank you. So,
Thanks.
I will get all your information in the show notes, and we'll get together and make sure that's all done. And until then, it's been lovely. Thank you once again so much.
Okay, thank you.